I'm just the community leader, the tribe leader here of the Generate Facebook community. By the way, if you're watching this or if you're just catching this quickly, do me a favor, click the like button, leave a comment that you've gotten something out of this Generate group. I really love some of the interaction that I've been seeing and been getting a lot of feedback by private message that a lot of these videos have been helpful. And we've got a couple great interviews coming up next week. Also, if you know anybody who's in the lead generation, marketing, anybody who really crushes it in the sales space, I'd love to talk to them and maybe talk about doing an interview. So what are we doing? We are reviewing Lead Generate, 61 Days to Double Your Pay. We're on day 49. So probably a couple days we might skip, but we might get this wrapped up by the end of the month. And day 49 is really great because the title of the chapter is Never Stop Hunting, right? Never Stop Hunting. And I get it. I've been doing some type of lead generation business for coming up on 20 years, 21 years, 20 years. Yeah, 20 years. Makes me feel very old when I say that out loud. And so I've been working in the same neighborhoods, in the same career, effectively in the same business for almost 21 years now. And I've seen enough people, professionals, I've seen many professionals come and go because they stop lead generating, right? They stop prospecting. They kind of rest on their laurels or whatever euphemism you want to come up with. So let me read to you this chapter. When I'm making my sales calls, my favorite objection, I've heard this objection my entire career as a loan officer when calling realtors to try to set a coffee appointment. Thanks for reaching out, Scott. I've actually heard great things about you, but you know, I'm only a listing agent. I only take listings. First of all, I have a hard time believing this statement, even when I know it's true. I usually hold my tongue, even though what I want to say is on every single real estate transaction in America, there is a buyer and a seller. You're telling me that you just give up on 50% of all the available transactions and money-making opportunities in your field? Are you lying to me or are you just not paying attention? That's what I want to say. I'm usually much more tactful than that. But I've never really understand this idea of realtors falling into the space of like, well, I'm just a listing agent, right? Or loan officers doing the same thing after they grow a book of business. Oh, well, I don't call any realtors anymore. I just work my book of business. It's like, okay, I understand the concept, right? Like you've come to a point in your career where you can be a little bit more picky and choosy about the deals that you want to do. But here is the interesting thing, right? I've heard it all the time from realtors, from loan officers. I've heard all the talking points, right? Buyers are liars. I prefer the guaranteed commission of a listing, blah, 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 blah. You know, I've heard the same thing from lenders where they say, oh, you know, realtors aren't, they're not committed to me. It's very hard to find somebody who's loyal. Just excuse after excuse after excuse, right? But here's the problem when you annex a portion of your business, especially the portion of the business that got you there, right? And today I'm kind of picking on realtors. I understand that. But almost all realtors start out like they'll take anybody, right? They'll take any buyer, they'll take any lease, they'll drive people around town and show them houses. And they build their business on those buyers, right? And then 3 to 4 or 5 to 7 years later, those buyers refer other buyers, and then they sell their house, and then they move up to another house. And now all of a sudden, that same realtor, if they've done a great job about prospecting to their own database and staying in front of their clients, they start to see a lot of success, right? So I would say, and I've seen this just over and over and over again over the last 20 years, is the trajectory of a lot of these realtors that I've worked with, you know, hungry, aggressive, work with any buyer, you know, grow. As they're still growing that buyer pool, now their buyers from 3, 4, 5 years ago start to resell. They start to have kids. They start to upgrade. So now that same agent maybe has to build out a team or get an assistant because they go from buyers and sellers to buyers and sellers and people that are upgrading. So more buyers at a higher price point. It goes, that's an amazing business cycle, right? That's an amazing repeat business where you're continuing to get money out of your own database from people you've already built a relationship with. Where I wrote the chapter, Never Stop Hunting, is that the problem is, even if you're great at farming, right? So let's say going out and working, I'm using the realtor example, going out and working with every buyer and talking to everybody and driving around town, doing whatever you have to do to get somebody in a house when you're new and you're hungry and you're hunting for business, right? And then you start to build your database, and then you start to work within your database. Then some of your clients, they upgrade, they move into the forever house, they sell, you get 2 deals out of it, right? You get a listing and then you get a buy. That's awesome. That's like farming in your own backyard. You're just planting seeds of your own database and you're harvesting your own money. Problem is, eventually, if you stop doing the hunting, eventually those clients end up in their forever home, and there's no other real estate transaction to do with that client, and it's going to be 20 years before their kids are buying a house. Or they sell and they move out of state, which we're seeing a lot now in Southern California. And so not only do you lose the buyer transaction in the other state, that client is now gone and out of your local ecosystem, right? And so I've seen it time and time again over the last 20 years where an agent who's the biggest agent in Burbank or the biggest agent in Mount Washington or the biggest agent in Valencia, they ride this wave of like all that business from when they were hungry and they were working with buyers and they were excited and they would do anything for anybody trying to get into house. And then they were crushing it. They became the biggest agent in their market area because they were still bringing in those buyers. They were still funneling in new blood into their database. Then they were reselling homes for clients that had, bought a home 5 years ago. They were helping them upgrade to a bigger home in the neighborhood. And it was this virtuous cycle. And then in 4 years, you don't see any of their listing signs anywhere. And you look up their numbers and things have just fallen off a cliff. And usually that's because, and this happens in all businesses, this is why all businesses die eventually. There's no business that has been around forever because eventually they all die. It's because they stop prospecting, right? They stop adding new clients into the funnel. They stop making new connections and building new relationships. And they say something akin to what a realtor would say is like, I'm only a listing agent. Or they say something akin to what a loan officer would say, oh, I don't talk to realtors anymore. I only work my database. Well, eventually your database ends up at the finality of the product or service you're offering. They're in the forever house. They have the 30-year fixed mortgage at 2.875% that's never going to get refinanced. They've bought the biggest, best knife set that you could ever sell, and there's nothing left to put in their kitchen. Eventually, you run out of clients if you're not feeding the funnel with new people by going out and making connections, building relationships, hunting for new relationships. So just a quick reminder today that if you want your business to have this virtuous ongoing cycle, you've got to keep feeding the funnel, right? You can't just give up and say like, well, now I only focus on this one segment of my business and I'm going to completely ignore what got me here. So just a good reminder here from the book, Lead Generate, 61 Days to Double Your Pay. Never stop hunting, never stop building new relationships, never stop putting new people into your funnel. And that's our tip for today. If you watched this video, if you liked it, if this resonated, do me a favor, just click the like button, leave a comment. I like to know that I'm not just talking to myself, although I do that a lot recently here on the Zoom. But love you guys. We'll talk soon, and you know where to find me if you need